Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here, and today I'm going to be doing a video talking about Jimmy Butler and Kevin Love, and basically why I think that a trade for exchanging the two of them between the Timberwolves and the Cavaliers would be a really beneficial trade for each team. So basically what I'm going to do in this video is discuss a few potential scenarios I could see happening that would make sense for a trade going down between the two. Which players would be getting sent back and forth. I have two scenarios, and then I want to talk about basically how this would affect each team and why they would want to do it and how it would make them better off. Okay, so getting into it, the first trade I have is just a straight up Kevin Love for Jimmy Butler. Kevin Love's currently making $24 million, Jimmy Butler's making $20 million, so they'd be able to make this trade work in that the salaries are close enough that the Timberwolves could take on the extra $4 million. And really what the main motivation here for the Cavaliers would be is that Kevin Love is currently signed to a deal for this year and then 4 years after that. He's an all-star in his prime, but really the team is not looking to have an all-star in their prime at this point, I don't feel like. I think that they really want to blow it up, clear house with all the guys that are left from the LeBron era, and then reestablish a team around Colin Sexton and whoever they can get in the draft going forward, and maybe some of the younger guys such as Osman and Hood and Clarkson. So they could have those guys and then draft a few more guys and be looking to sort of perform a rebuild of sorts for the Cavaliers. So for that reason, I think that they want to unload Kevin Love. And when they signed him to the extension, I think that was sort of under the previous regime of Ty Lue, who wanted the team to compete and still be a playoff contender. And it's clear now from them firing Ty Lue and really not playing the veterans at all that they don't want to be a competing team and they want to rebuild and blow it up. So if they do this trade, they get rid of this year and 4 more years of Kevin Love, and they bring in Jimmy Butler, who after this season will be gone. So that allows them to free up $20 million in cap space and also get rid of the Kevin Love contract 4 years sooner than they would be able to otherwise, which eventually is going to hit up towards $30 million by the end of that. So down the road, they're saving a lot of money. And so that's really my main reasoning for why the Cavaliers would want to do this, is basically they get out of 4 years of paying Kevin Love a little under $30 million. Compared to 1 year of $20 million from Jimmy Butler. Now, as for the Timberwolves, this trade doesn't make as much sense in that Kevin Love would be coming into a very crowded front court that already has Karl-Anthony Towns, Taj Gibson, and Gorgui Dieng wanting a lot of minutes. But basically, I think what they could do here is start Kevin Love and Karl-Anthony Towns, and then bring in Taj Gibson and Gorgui Dieng off the bench. Maybe each of them maybe Gibson can play about 20 minutes a night and Love can play about 28. And then Dieng can play about 15 and Karl-Anthony Towns playing around 33 minutes a night. I think that'd be a pretty good split for that. And then you don't have Jimmy Butler anymore, but you've gotten an all-star in his place, which I think is better than what most teams are going to give you. And then your starting lineup would probably look something like Jeff Teague at the 1, probably at the 2, Josh Okogie, who's been a rookie, who's actually playing pretty well for the team right now. He's providing a good spark when he starts or off the bench, and he's proving to have some potential. He's a pretty athletic guy and looking pretty solid so far here. So potentially you could start him at the 2. You could also bring Derrick Rose into the starting lineup, but I think he'd work better off the bench, sort of as a leader of the second unit, where he can be the guy that always has the ball in his hands and is free to sort of do whatever he wants. So there's one possibility. You could have Teague, Okogie, Wiggins, Love, and Karl-Anthony Towns as starting lineup. Or you could change things up a little bit and put Anthony Tolliver in as the starting small forward and Wiggins as the starting 2 and Jeff Teague as the 1, and then bring Okogie and Derrick Rose off the bench. I actually like this lineup a little bit better in that while the Timberwolves lose some mobility, this lineup is so much better for shooting because Tolliver is a better shooter than Okogie. And with this lineup, you basically have nobody's a terrible shooter on the court. Everyone can make threes. And then you get up to about 3 or 3.5, depending on how you see Teague. Really solid three-point shooters, and that Tolliver, Love, and Karl-Anthony Towns are all good shooters. The thing that you definitely downgrade with for this Timberwolves team by doing this trade is the defense. Kevin Love's definitely not a good defender, and they still would have Jang and Gibson, who are good defenders, but they would lose out on Jimmy Butler, who's been a good defender for them and helped them increase their ratings as far as how they've done on that side of the ball. But they'd be getting a lot more value than I think other teams would be offering. So that's how I feel about that. And let's see here. So yeah, they would have to probably move Tolliver to the 3 most of the time, I think, because really, if they didn't, he wouldn't play at all, and they'd lose out on his spacing. And basically, you'd have to rely on Josh Okogie to be your starter, and Derrick Rose as your 6th man, with really not much else for backcourt help. But I like this move a little bit better because Wiggins can easily play the 2. Tolliver can just be a spot-up shooter at the 3, and then you can have 2 guys coming off the bench in not Tyreek Evans, excuse me. 2 guys off the bench in Derrick Rose and Josh Okogie. Now that's my first scenario, just straight up Kevin Love for Jimmy Butler. My second scenario kind of ties into another video that I had that came out a few days ago. That video is regarding Kyle Korver trade rumors, one of which was to the Timberwolves. But for this video, I'm going to incorporate that a little bit in a modified trade I have, which is Kevin Love and Kyle Korver to the Timberwolves in exchange for Jimmy Butler and Gorgui Dieng. Now this trade I actually like a lot better than the last one because each team addresses a need a little bit more. So essentially, let's look at what happens because of this trade. So from the Cavaliers' perspective, they get Jimmy Butler, who will leave after this season, and they get Gorgui Dieng, who's on the hook for this year and 2 more years at $15 million. But now let's see what they get rid of. They get rid of Kevin Love, who's on the hook for this year and 4 more years at around a little under $30 million. And then you have Kyle Korver, who's on for this year and next year at $7.5 million. So now by clearing those guys out, you clear out about $36 million in cap space for this next upcoming season or off season. But with Jimmy leaving, or let's see here. So basically, you take on $5 additional million in getting Jimmy Butler and Dieng. But after Jimmy Butler leaves in free agency, that'll clear up $15 million in cap space for you. So they'll have an additional $15 million in cap space. They'll have gotten rid of Kevin Love, who they don't really want. They'll have gotten rid of Kyle Korver, who they don't really need anymore, considering they're in a rebuilding situation. And they will have basically gotten Gorgui Dieng for those 2 guys. And Gorgui Dieng can fill in at center or power forward for Love. They could move Tristan Thompson to the 4 and Gorgui Dieng to the 5, or bring him off the bench if they want to start Larry Nance. But I think Larry Nance is much more of a power forward, so having Gorgui Dieng as a starting center works better. You could flip-flop whichever combination of those 3 guys you want to start at the power forward and the center. But really, I think that that's a good deal for them. Basically, in the long term, you're paying Gorgui $15 million over the next couple seasons instead of paying Love like $28 million over the next couple of seasons, which I think is a good exchange. He's also not a good enough player that he's going to take them from a 20-win team to a 28-win team. Like with Kevin Love, I think if he's healthy and playing well, I think that he would make the Cavs around a 30-win team, maybe honestly, if they were playing really well, a 35-win team. But with Gorgui Dieng, he's not good enough to move the meter on them going from a 20-win team to a better team. So I think he kind of fits as far as them trying to get a better draft pick. I think he's the guy that they would want compared to Kevin Love on the team. So I think from that perspective, it works well for the Cavaliers. They clear up cap space. They're going to be tanking because they're not really getting much back after Jimmy leaves this season. And they can market it as they're getting a guy who's in the heart of his prime, who's a good defender. And what do rebuilding teams always get criticized for? Being terrible on defense. Well, Gorgui Dieng's decent on defense, and so you can market it that you're trying to build a team up in a new way by bringing in a defensive presence that's just how the Cavs might have to try and spin it if fans are upset, but it doesn't really matter how they spin it. They can do whatever they want. Okay, from the Timberwolves perspective, you gain Kyle Korver and you gain Kevin Love. Two really good shooters. Kevin Love, an all-star caliber shooter. I really like this trade in that the Timberwolves have been in some desperate need of shooting last year particularly, and so this definitely addresses that need. Your shooting lineup, if you want to say like your lineup with your best shooters in it, it could look like Jeff Teague, Kyle Korver, Anthony Tolliver, Kevin Love, and Karl Anthony Towns. Now, would that be one of the worst defensive lineups you could put on a court? Yes, but offensively, it's immaculate spacing. And really, like, there's nobody on that court that I just listed between Teague, Korver, Tolliver, Love, and Towns who cannot space the floor well. You would create a lot of good opportunities for guys to penetrate. And even if you want to say they go with something like sub in Wiggins for Tolliver, there's still 4 guys that can be catch and shoot guys, and you can open up the interior for Wiggins to just drive all day. My thought process in this is sort of similar to what the Bucks are doing with Giannis. As you can, if you don't know, basically the Bucks have Brook Lopez now, who's a shooting center, and their strategy is 4 guys stand on the perimeter while Giannis drives to the hoop, and if help defense comes, he'll kick it. If help defense doesn't come, he'll score at the rim. That's what the Timberwolves could do if they do this. If this trade were to happen, Wiggins would be the guy who would, obviously he's worse than Giannis, but he's still really good at driving and scoring at the hoop, so that would space the floor, and basically defenses would have to choose whether they want to be beat at the rim by Wiggins or on the perimeter by Towns or Love or Korver. Now, I'm not saying that Korver would play a ton. Maybe around 20 minutes a night would be a really solid amount of minutes for him to play. Again, he addresses that gaping hole that they have at shooting guard, I feel like, right now. That you don't have to start Josh Okogie then, or you could, and then bring in Korver off the bench with the bench unit if you think that's where you want the spacing to be more. But he definitely addresses a big hole that the team has at shooting guard. And then if this were to happen, you'd have a pretty good bench too, in that you'd have probably as your starting lineup Teague, Korver, Wiggins, Love, and Towns. And then off the bench you'd have Derrick Rose, Okogie, Tolliver, and Taj Gibson. I like that lineup a lot. And, you know, even if you might think that, oh, maybe like they need more defense in the starting lineup, you could sub in Taj Gibson for Kevin Love, bring Kevin Love in off the bench, and just and you could really just play him like 30 minutes a night, but just have him come off the bench, and I don't think he'd really care that much. He came off the bench for the Cavs in the finals, and he didn't care that much. And it just, honestly, besides all I think that the trade makes a lot of sense as far as like how it would work for the teams, in that like the Timberwolves need a lot of shooting, and they would be getting that, and the Cavaliers want to clear up cap space, and they'd be getting that. But besides that, I feel like Kevin Love going back to the Timberwolves would be a pretty cool move, and they would still stay in playoff contention. Whether they keep Thibodeau as the head coach or not, who knows? I think that with this team, honestly, it sounds ridiculous, but they don't need a defensive coach as their coach because this team is so offense-oriented. I think that they should get an offensive-oriented coach and hire an associate head coach. Or, you know, vice versa. They could have a defensive head coach, but they need an associate head coach that is the opposite to balance the team, because they do need a lot of help on defense, but I think that this team could be so amazing offensively. Having only a defensive head coach right now is sort of limiting what they can do on offense, even though because Thibodeau hasn't really had any effect on the defense. It's like slightly better than before he got there, and the offense has like stagnated from its ratings from before he got there. It's like it's all right, but it could be so amazing. What I would do, I think, is maybe do a scenario like get Mike Brown as your head coach, who, if you're not familiar with him, he's the Warriors associate head coach right now. He's very good, very defensive minded, comes from Popovich's coaching tree. So I'd get him. He's defensive minded. I know Tibbs is too. So you're saying, well, why replace him? Well, what I would do is hire him as head coach, but then as associate head coach, hire a really offensive oriented guy. I think who I would go with is probably Mark Jackson, because he just understands offenses so well. And another guy who, although Steve Kerr gets all the credit for how the Warriors have performed, Mark Jackson was the coach that was there, who was the architect of bringing in Steph, bringing in Clay, bringing in Draymond, was there during the Bogut trade, was there when Harrison Barnes came in. So the core of that team that won the first championship was really all a result of Mark Jackson. And so I would bring him in as the associate head coach, and then I think that this Timberwolves team would be dynamite and would be like a 55-win team. Those are my thoughts on this trade. I think it benefits both teams. I think the Timberwolves have a lot more to gain from this trade than the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers are basically just streamlining their rebuilding process, whereas the Timberwolves could remain a contender in the West and potentially be an elite contender in the West if they play this trade right and they play their cards right. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed what I had to say, and if you have any thoughts on the subject, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.